What's up guys, my name is Coffman, lead carpenter for Coffman Construction. We specialize in framing new homes. Now behind me we have a house that's ready for trusses. So today I'm going to show you the steps to frame a truss roof, ensuring that you have a quality install. We'll go over roof sheathing and roof taping as well. So the first thing that we need before we can install these trusses is going to be this booklet here. Now the truss manufacturers should provide this to you with every truss order. So what this has is it has all of the info. We call this the truss profiles. And at the very back of the booklet, you can usually find 2 or 3 copies of the truss roof layout. Now you might notice I've got my pinky wrapped up. An important thing to remember with trusses is these metal plates are really sharp, and moving them around, if you're not careful, can scratch you up pretty good. That's exactly what happened here, so make sure you're careful. So the first thing we do with our truss order is we can get our layout and we can look for our gable trusses. Now these are usually our trusses that are on the edges of the wall and run in line with the wall. So what we want to do is we want to find those trusses, we want to pull them out and get them ready for plywood, because we like to sheet our gable trusses on the ground if we have the opportunity. So what the guys are doing right now is separating up the trusses, getting them closer to where they're going to need to be with the crane, and prep for our truss day. So you can see we set our 5-point laser on the bottom plate and it shoots up to the top. It's a little hard to see, but that laser is right on the edge of the plate. It's just about perfect, honestly. All right, so you can see here, in order to get our gables prepped to set, the first thing we do is sheet them in zip, get the seams taped and rolled, and then we can frame on our overhang for the roof. I like to include a strap across the joints because it helps to keep it tight in case of any deflection while we're craning it around. And then back here, you can also see that we have a ledger attached. That's because this section of the house bumps out. We can preemptively put our ledger on and block it, so that way when we're sheathing this roof, it's ready to roll. Now let's take a second to look at this up close. So you can see here, we've got our 12-inch overhang total. So we've got a 2x6 on the bottom, a 9-inch stud, and then a 2x6 on top. Now the 2 plates together equal 3 inches. So we subtract 3 inches from 12, and that gets us our 9-inch block there. Now here we're setting our gable truss against our framed rake wall. We like to do this because balloon framing the rake wall will eliminate the hinge point from the top of the wall to the gable. So here, in order to get the best rigging, we want to find our center point, and we want to basically take the length of these straps, which are 20-foot straps, but because we're cradling them, it's 10 feet. The ideal rigging disbursement is if you have 10 foot of strap on each side, you want to have 10 foot between them. So we want approximately 5 feet between them. A little less is better than more. That should get us a good distribution of load on the straps, and it should help keep us fairly balanced as well. A whole lot of truss. So you can see here, when we're cutting out little triangles to run our straps through our top chord of our truss, we take that triangle and we tack it to the face of the truss there. So when we're doing soffit, fascia, or siding, later on, we can patch it back in easily. Hallelujah. Dude, I can't even believe how sick this is. Golly, dude. We're so sick. Now one really cool feature about this crane that we use is that it allows me to both rig the trusses and set them all while operating the crane. You can see the yellow controller around my neck is how I control it. So now with the trusses installed, before we sheet, we want to get our truss bracing on and we want to get our drywall backing on. So for 2x4 walls like this, it's really easy to run a 2x6 centered over it, and that'll give you an inch of backing for the ceiling on either side. Can you get me a 2x6, 7 feet long? Thank you, sir. So I can center my 2x6 on the 2x4. And now this 2x4 is backed on both sides. So you can see here, we have something that we call a dead space, and these need fire blocking, which you can use 3/4 inch plywood as for that. So I'm gonna run some blocks along this as ledgers, and I'll drop this in now. Believe me, it's a heck of a lot easier to do it now than to do it later. And now this seals up the space, so no air will come through into the attic. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do in this section with the trusses set and our gables up is we're gonna cut our tails and install our sub-fascia. And this usually, especially on small runs, can be done by a single carpenter. So what I like to do is grab my sub-fascia material and lean it up between one of the bays out of the way before I climb up. So now our overhangs were already cut to the right length when we framed it on the wall. So all we need to mark is this side. What I'm marking is 10.5 from the framing, so that way when we add our 1.5 inch sub-fascia, we have 12 inches total, which will give us just the right amount of space to nail our soffit. So now with our speed square, we can take a stair gauge, put it on our 6/12 pitch, and I can reach under, line it up with my chalk line on top, and mark it. I like to mark the left side because that is much more comfortable to cut with the skill saw. I'll go through and mark all of these even around the corner, so that way when I start cutting, I don't need to stop and remark anything. Now these tails are ready to cut. So I'll start all the way on the far right side. I can just cut my line on all of these. Now with our tails cut, we're ready to install our sub-fascia. Now this isn't totally necessary, but I prefer to use a cordless nail gun for situations like these where a hose can be limiting in some ways. Now hanging sub-fascia by yourself can be pretty tricky, but there's a few things that can make it a little easier. So before I set it up here, I'm gonna set a little nail right here. That'll make sense in just a moment. So I can slide this up here, rest it on my nail, and I can rest it on my wall over here. Now I'm gonna want this sub-fascia to die into this plywood right here. So I can slide this over to where it's about 1/8 shy of that plywood. Now, while I'm sitting on my nail there, I can put a layout line on the top of my sub-fascia that shows me where that's gonna nail, and I can now pivot this out. I wanna be just a little bit past that corner, and I'm gonna give myself 2 toenails. through the corner, just like that. When I come over to this side, where I've got my nail here, I can slide off, come to the edge, and just a little twist. We'll pull that 2x6 right down to the face. I like to give 3 nails per tail because sometimes some of the framers will want to step on these and you want to make sure it's nice and strong. Now what we do is we plane our tail down to the center of our sub-fascia. We might need to pull it either up or down a little bit in order to hit our mark. Do any fancy toenails or any. So now with our sub-fascia on, the next thing to do is mark for our roof sheathing. So we can split our tape in the middle of the sub-fascia and mark 4 foot. Do that on each end. What's nice is here you can see that same mark is going to break right in the middle of our overhang framing. All right, and then we can, dude, this looks like it might be just under 8 feet. Cut 2 inches off, Zach. What's nice is after you have the first row set, you can just walk like a normal person. Look at that, check out that line there. The perfect placement for the stack now. Guy here will go 47 3/4. All right, a little 61 action. I got like 26 here. So let's go, we can go 25 there, 25 on one end to 25 3/4 on the other. All right. I'm gonna need to cut this side back a little bit. Easy peasy. see these piggyback trusses. We've got our 2x4s running flat along the tops, and we just stack our piggybacks right on top of those. Now it's important when you're laying these flat 2x4s to make sure you're set back far enough from the corner, because you need to line up with that. So these are in place. Slide it down either side. That looks nice. We can get these all nailed off.
It's cold.
Nice, looks good. So here we have our overframe that we're gonna put in here, and because our ridge is too long, what we're gonna do is we cut these rafters short so we can slide our ridge up underneath, and then we can nail it to our gable, and we can nail it to these rafters, which will let us fill in the rest of this. Because this ridge doesn't terminate on the roof, it's gonna terminate back here with another common rafter at the end of it. All right, so here to get our rafter that comes through here to our ridge, where it bears on the pitch there, we have our 612 angle of this roof bearing on a 612 this way. So that's not just a regular 612 plumb cut, it's basically gonna be double a 612 subtracted from 90. So for a 612, we have about 27 degrees, which double is 54, subtracted from 90, let's see, that would give us 36. Mark that on this, 36. That looks great. That's our seat cut for that guy. Do you guys want to get all of our lengths measured? We'll do both sides at once because this is a longer one, we're going to run one side and then the other and work our way across like that. So what we can do, we can get one of our extra 2x12s that should be over there and just run it onto one of these guys. Like run it onto that middle piece and then onto the roof so we have something to stand on to measure the top. Know what I'm saying? Yeah. So now I can line my rafter up flush, get my seat cut where it's nice. And this will come across just like that. This is a little bit odd of a way to do it because our ridge isn't quite long enough. But we can add another post at this joint here that'll keep everything nice and strong. And then nail through the ledger this way, because that'll be the easiest to hammer it tight. So 213 and 1/8, the exact same as the other side. That's a good sign. Nope. So here, we've got two roof pitches dying into each other, and we're gonna have something called an irregular hip. It's called an irregular hip because this is a 612 and this is a 912. Something else that makes this unique is that it's also an overframe. So we're not framing dying into other rafters, we're dying on top of the sheathing. So what I like to do in this scenario to figure out my rafter numbers, so I'll run a string line on one edge of where the rafter is going to be, and I can use my speed square off of that to get the angles. So I'll first mark my plumb line right there, and I can check my square off of my plumb line like that. I can get my plumb cut, which is 22.5 degrees. I can get my bevel, which is 33 degrees, but it's going to be the complementary angle of that, so it's going to be 57 degrees. I can come to the bottom. I can do the same thing down here. Here I've got 45 degrees, and my bevel for here, what I do for that is I want to set my square up parallel to the rafter. I can use my torpedo, and I get 18 degrees. So using those methods with just a string line, it ends up being a heck of a lot faster than math. I can get all those things together, and then all I need is my overall dimension to get this guy cut. 50 3/4. So this compound bevel is going to have a 57 degree bevel, which the saw can't set to, but I'll show you a trick to get it. So I'll first cut by square on my long point, and then on the top of my rafter right here, I'll mark what my bevel needs to be, and then with my saw still set square, I can line up with that. Just cut all the way through. That gets me a nice, clean, long bevel. So now I can pull from that my 50 3/4 number to my long point. If you remember, that was a 45 degree, so I can just use this side of my square. Now that gets our 18 degree bevel, which my saw can set to. Now we can see if our piece fits. And that's how you can measure your irregular hip rafters. So now with our roof fully installed and our tape installed and rolled, the next thing that is important that we tackle with the trusses is something we like to call truss bracing. Now the trusses will come with a little bit of paperwork with something called the truss profiles. This will have each truss labeled, and on that page there will be a little spot on the bottom right that will specify what bracing you need and where it goes on the trusses. Now this bracing is important because, as you know, the value of trusses comes from the fact that you can support an entire roof using smaller pieces of lumber like 2x6 and 2x4. Now the bracing is looks like what this 2x4 is here, running along the bottom, and inside there along the webs. Now this helps to provide a little bit of lateral support to the trusses because the sheathing applied only to the top of the trusses and the drywall applied to the bottom of the trusses provides shear, but only in those sections. And we need shear value inside the trusses in the mid spans. So that's why the truss bracing is very important. Now your truss profiles will also call the uplift force on the trusses. Now this is where you would install things like hurricane ties or truss screws. Now hurricane ties fasten to the bottom of the truss along the top of the wall, and they basically secure your roof truss to the top plate to help prevent uplift from extreme winds. Now each different kind of hurricane tie has a specific amount of uplift force that it can withstand. So it's important to read the truss profiles to make sure you're getting enough force from each different hurricane tie. A lot of times, if you need more uplift force than you can get with one hurricane tie, you can double them up and do one on each side. Now we're going to fast forward here a little bit in our framing process to show you what the importance of our studs lining up with our floor joists is. You can see here behind me, we have the HVAC techs running chases through our stud bays. And what's important is you can see they're right between the studs and there's no joist in the middle of that bay. And that goes for any other bay in this house, as long as it's not over an LVL. The importance of this is it allows the mechanical trades to be able to run their stuff through the bays without us needing to come back through and add headers in our floors so they can box around it. This is also a great portion in the house where you can see how all of our studs line up. All through those back walls. All the way through to the exterior.